item for action on our agenda today. I'd like to start by thanking once again the Oak Harbor Planning Commission, which hosted the City Council and myself, along with city staff, in a joint meeting yesterday evening. I found it very informative. This was our second joint meeting with the Planning Commission this year on topics of mutual interest. So it's nice to do that and be able to continue doing that. So I think it looks like we're going to start at, we do have, although we don't take roll at these, I know we have one of our counselors, Councilor Wiesner, is with us today virtually. Hi, Councilor Wiesner, and I believe that Councilor Munns is still traveling. So the rest of our council is here. And I'd like to start then with item number A on our agenda, which is the park plan implementation. And for that, I think we have our Park and Rec Director, Brian Smith. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. Glad to be with you today. I'm going to start out just with framing this discussion a little bit. Three items that really I would like to walk away from with a little bit of indication or direction from Council on. The first is a proposal that was recommended by the Park Board with the installation of a disc golf course. The second is discussion and your views and feedback on the need and urgency of a installation of additional new sports fields, particularly soccer fields, for the community. And the third is your thoughts and feedback and maybe a little bit of the direction you'd like us to explore as far as locations for those, and your thoughts on the future expansion of those into a more regional sports complex park that has multiple activity fields in there. And we can have a little bit of discussion on the pros of that for the city. So to start out, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but to give you a little bit of background into the location that is generally located at 846 Gun Club Road. We call it Harbor Heights. It was acquired by the city in 2020. It's on the north end of the city. It's about a 75-acre parcel. It was procured and planned for soccer fields in anticipation of the school district building some fields adjacent to Fort Nugent Park on the property that they own there. That would remove at least half of those fields as part of that build out. I'll pause here a little bit on that point. We are working with the school district to understand the timing and impact of that. They have indicated that in 2025 they would like to go back out for a levy to secure funding to build on that site, but nothing is in stone, right? So right now we're talking about maybes and ifs. Also, something to consider with the Fort Nugent site is it is school district property. It's primarily reserved by private clubs and leagues. The city has a lease with the district to handle the reservation of those and to do the maintenance of those fields, but it's not our property. We don't program it, and so part of the discussion is what is the city's role in this, and what's your goal that you want to achieve out of this. So phase one at Harbor Heights included 2 soccer fields and a 50-space parking lot. We had budgeted originally at $1.6 million. There were several things that weren't in consideration of that budget, primarily the access road, grading, utilities, and different things like that later we'd find out would become very costly. When we got to the 90% design that came in, that total for the phase one, including those considerations, was about $11.5 million. Obviously, that is quite substantially over what we had originally budgeted. The total build out of the sports park is estimated at $60.7 million. There's several things that contributed to that. You know, the site is not easily accessible. We have some access from Gun Club Road, but that would require upgrading that to county standards, bringing in utilities. We have an access that is adjacent to the property from Elwha to the south, but those roads are not really built to handle the traffic we would see, especially if we built out to a regional sports complex. The city had quite a bit of, I think preference would be to enter in from the west, from Heller. We looked at several different versions of that. There were 2 concept plans that were presented by David Evans, who was contracted to do the planning for this project. And we did a series of open houses and surveys and got feedback on that. Concept 2 with this configuration that you see here is what was selected. But when we got to that design and saw what the budget cost would be, staff came back to council. Through feedback with that, the project was put on hold. We canceled any of the pending grants that we had, and that's kind of where it's been till today. So some of the site considerations that contributed to that, and any considerations of building on the site in the future, mainly elevation drop. We have about 73 feet of elevation drop from the northwest end above the ridge to the southeast end. We have the access road, which was a very costly contributor to that, as well as stormwater and watershed considerations of any parking lot and non-permeable surfaces that would add to that. We did find in the project development notes that there was noted there related to lighting, that the Naval Air Station had discussions at some point with staff on trying to stay away from tall lighting and instead have parking lot lighting in a bollard configuration that would be low to the ground. So that's something that we would have to figure out with the Naval Air Station if we were to put in anything that required overhead taller lighting on the site. The survey that came back was pretty interesting, and this kind of segues into some of the options that we want to talk about and the park board's recommendation. So when the top 3 activities were, when the public were asked about the top 3 activities, 177 said, yes, we need soccer fields, but very closely behind that, as you see the top 2 there, 170 was trails for desire for those kind of amenities. And also with the amenity questions and a variety of different things we could have on there, far and away restrooms was number 1 at 253, and then trails and lighting for night games were the second and third things that they wanted to see at a park there. So I'm going to start with just the space that we have in the 75 acres there at Harbor Heights. Options beyond just a sports complex. So the recommendation that the park board, the proposal that they they talked about, they met on site, looked at, hiked up and down Harbor Heights, looked at the terrain, and the proposal for a disc golf course. This is a proposal by Eric McCabe, who is a professional disc world champion. He designs, I think he has like 16 or so courses that serve as venues for regional tournaments and championship games. And the site is naturally plays in very nicely to that kind of a format. Going kind of along the same theme with trails, a mountain bike trail, some of those costs can be reduced through volunteer and in-house site prep and assistance through the Regional Mountain Bike Association. Educational walking trails, which are a little more compatible with the disc golf design proposal. Again, this is something that we can get educational assistance with, but this also aligns perfectly with the $1.7 million that we got in a forestry management grant. Part of that is access to green spaces. And we have very few naturalized green spaces in Oak Harbor. So this would not only be our largest park if we were to put in a trail system and use it for that purpose, but regionally it'd be a very attractive space for that. And it's kind of just easy to build that into the natural terrain. Now, these 3 trail system concepts aren't particularly compatible with use at the same time. You know, you don't want to have discs flying into people or bikers. You don't want bikers to be roaring it down around the corner into a family walking along the trail system. So I'd imagine we would want to build this out in a way that you have those various trails and encourage the public to use the appropriate trail system for the activity that they're doing. But we also know that people just, you know, take the path of least resistance and oftentimes flex use these trail spaces. Additional considerations for no matter what we put in there are questions around, do we need to have restrooms on site? What utilities for maybe lighting or restrooms or things need to be pulled in? We have some availability to pull from Elwha, but again, that access road from Elwha really is only able to handle a small amount of traffic. We don't want to inundate the neighborhood with a lot of parking. If the intent was to do like a regional style draw for anything there, like disc golf, we have to get some thought into how would we handle that. Would we want to connect it in with downtown and have a registration site downtown, and then the participants are shuttled up there and dropped off? Or is there a need for a parking lot? Parking and stormwater are going to be a big toll on public works and will increase the cost of anything we do there substantially. And then no matter what we do infrastructure-wise, we always have to have thoughts around the perpetual maintenance costs of anything we put in. Trail systems lend itself to a lot of volunteer help, which greatly reduces any staff maintenance costs there. They're easy to maintain, especially on an annual basis, and we have an active disc golf association club that comes out and maintains the current disc golf trails that we have already in our system, primarily at Fort Nugent Park. Steve Schuler, our Public Works Director, is here, and he can provide more feedback if you want a little better understanding around the scope and cost of some of these additional site considerations. So going back to the sports complex and the need for it and location. Like we said, the current fields belong to the school district. They're used by private clubs. So first revisiting the question of what is the city's role in trying to figure out a solution should those fields go away. I will say that regardless of if the fields go away, there is a need for additional fields. We're at capacity right now with use of the fields in the season during the summertime. We definitely could use additional fields in all the different sports categories. So again, what is the city's goal? Is it to simply replace potential future loss of some of those fields? Is it to increase our inventory of fields? What is the right increase? We're about to do a Parks and Recreation master plan. We can have that as part of the considerations for informing council on what is appropriate for our community needs, if you need some feedback on that. But we definitely should have a clear goal of what we want to achieve with this. The biggest mistake a lot of cities make in building infrastructure, especially recreation amenities, is we build to the needs of today instead of the needs of the next generation, which is really where these amenities are going to serve through until it's time to replace them. So we got to think about what is the capacity that we need to incorporate into any design. And then again, perpetual maintenance costs and how are we going to handle that, and resources that we want to allocate for that. If we do a full-size regional sports complex, that is additional staff, and there are revenue avenues with something like that that can help to offset those costs, but something we'll want to calculate out. So a couple of different options here. Do we continue planning and seeking funding for the current 75 acres that we've gotten at Harbor Heights, knowing that we have some substantial infrastructure support around developing anything in that area outside of just simple self-use trails? 2, do we acquire land and solve those site constraints issues and have a reduced cost to develop on a different location that is flat, already has that access to it, and just removes a lot of those additional costs that made this so cost prohibitive and put on hold? 3 is, we take no action. Let's see what the school district is going to do. Let's offer our support to them, see if we can partner with them. They are looking for active solutions to a possible loss of fields. They are making renovations to Memorial Stadium in hopes to replace some of that field usage. But again, that's not going to take care of all the capacity needs. So again, what is our role and what is council's goal in speaking to this demand from the public? As far as site locations, there's several things we can look at. There's land to the south of Fort Nugent Park right now. We could work around maybe procuring that and expanding the current fields that we have there. That keeps all the fields sort of together. We can look at areas like Windjammer Park or Fred Marsh, where we on the east side where we can build. We can piecemeal it and put a field here at like Neal Park and over here at a different park, and just try to develop that independently instead of having one multi sport complex. We can look at areas outside of the city, which takes a lot of that utility and public work infrastructure burden off of the city, where we have a lot of very flat terrain that's used for agriculture. We have private landowners and the county in this area that is highlighted here. Preferentially, I would definitely look at that option. It would be very cost effective to build what the original vision was in an area like this. It doesn't have to be contiguous to the city. We can have parkland outside without having to annex it. We would simply work with the sheriff's office for any jurisdictional enforcement issues, which I've done in other cities, and it has never been an issue. And then ultimately, like I said, what is your vision? Is the regional sports complex something that you would like us to continue to pursue? There are a lot of advantages to having something like this in our community. Right now, it really doesn't exist, and we're losing out to other surrounding communities who have put in the investment to this to draw regionally heads and beds economic development and tourism dollars. Oak Harbor really is the metro center of Island County, and we just simply are lacking behind some of the amenities that you would see in that kind of a regional business center draw. There's absolutely 100% paths forward to achieve this in a fiscally responsible way that is not going to be burdensome to the city. But this is a discussion we've put on hold a couple years ago, and it's time to bring it back up. And we've had some turnover both in staff and council, and would like to get your feedback and thoughts that you have around this. And again, coming back to the park board has had a proposal. They've discussed it, they've researched it and gone on site. They've provided a recommendation for installation of a disc golf course and looking at pursuing installation of walking trails at the current Harbor Heights site, no matter which direction we go. Phase 1 takes up only a very small portion of that 75 acres. And in the interim, if we do end up building out a regional sports park in that location, there's no reason we can't start utilizing it for public benefit, especially with the current grant funding that we have right now that can support that without any cost burden to the city. That's kind of the presentation. I would invite your comments, questions. We have some members of the park board here. Eric Topinski brought forward the proposal and has worked with Eric McCabe on the design. If you have any questions around that, otherwise, thank you, and we'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Nice job. So I'll turn to council for input. Mayor Pro Tem?
Just wondering if the park board members present have anything they'd like to add before council starts chiming in.
Mayor, City Council members, thanks for letting me speak. I'm Eric Topinski. I'm the Vice Chair of the Parks and Recreation Board. We brought this plan together to find ways, well, as part of a bigger scope of finding ways to activate unused or unactivated or underutilized park areas. Again, trying to focus on how do we bring something to our community members, especially those that might be in areas that are underserved with park representation, to give them sources of healthy recreation. Things that would be potentially multi-generational, allow for people of multi-abilities, would avoid some of the seasonality that we see from traditional sports, and take into account the geography and territory that the park would go in, rather than creating something that we overlay on a specific environment. Rather create something that might work more in harmony with the natural environment of the park as it already exists. I think Harbor Heights provided something very unique that Brian already highlighted about being a forested green space of pretty significant size in a community that sort of lacks that. And so we came across the proposal to create something that would be multi-use. Again, as the regional sports complex idea would be multi-use, so would a trails network along with a disc golf course / courses that would create activities that would, again, have low cost, low burden on park staff, that could be maintained through volunteerism, that would give people of all ages a chance to experience nature in this wonderful area that we get to call home, and have low cost options for activities. The cost to install and the cost to play disc golf is very low. The cost to walk along a trail, also very low. And those are things that we like, that we think can help our community on a variety of different levels. And that's why we were excited to bring forth this proposal to you all for your consideration. If there's any questions I can answer, I'd be glad to directly, otherwise I'll take my seat.
Yeah, Council? Yes, Councilor Stuckey?
Just one question for you based on your specialty. I've got
Yeah.
plenty of questions, but for you, can you give me an idea? I don't play disc golf.
Yeah.
I hear it's popular. Can you quantify that a little bit? Like, I don't hear a whole lot about it.
Yeah.
Not to say it's not thriving. I just don't know. So can you quantify it a little bit?
Well, let me answer that question by asking you this. You hear a lot about pickleball, right?
Heard a thing or two.
Yeah, pickleball is the fastest growing sport. The second fastest growing sport is disc golf. The reason you don't hear more about it is because you hear so much about pickleball. Okay, what does pickleball have that's attractive? It's fairly low cost. It's multi-generational. Okay, it can be family or housing unit based. So there's a lot of tie-ins that way to whoever you call sort of your network, your kin group, whatever that might be. Disc golf is the exact same. Now, everybody knows how to throw a Frisbee or has at least tried and maybe laughed at themselves in the process. That's the same thing. You never have to get past a laughing space. You hit a tree, you look silly. Well, guess what? That's all part of the game too. And so some of the other activities that might require a lot of additional practice and a lot of additional cost, well, you don't have that with disc golf. And you can buy a Frisbee for a disc golf disc for less than $10 and you're out there. And in fact, there's plenty of organizations even that will allow folks to get into it for completely free, like the Whidbey Island Disc Golf Club. Yeah.
Yes, Julie.
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand raised, Mayor.
Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you. Good to see you, Eric, and thanks for that info. You know, during my last couple of weeks on the Parks Board, we were talking about this, obviously, and I think the Parks Board knows my feelings. I love the idea of the disc golf, and I love the idea of hiking trails, and I also love the idea of the bike trails. Obviously, we have to be conscious of parking, you know, as we move forward with those. So I think we got to start with one of them, you know, see what kind of consternation we create with the parking issues up there. You know, it's currently kind of a bit of a dead-end street, you know, depending upon, you know, which direction we figure people are going to come in at to approach the course. And then as we deal with those issues, you know, maybe, you know, we can move into that hiking trail. And I think the hiking trail will kind of naturally come with the disc golf, because I think a lot of people, when they go up there to see the disc golf, are going to realize there's trails. But, you know, great job on behalf of the Parks Board guys. I know you guys have been talking about this for months now and putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you. May I add one other thing in response to that? The proposal that we offered for the creation of disc golf courses also included the design of the trail network so that they would work in harmony to help coordinate traffic flow. One of the things that, and reasons that I picked that designer, is because he designs whole sort of park ecosystems for this. one of our concerns is always safety. I mean, that's the predominant concern. If you're throwing a flying disc, just like if you're throwing any object, we need to be concerned about who might receive that disc. And it's supposed to be a disc golf basket. We don't want people walking in the way of that, just like you wouldn't want people walking across the fairway of a golf course. That said, we want to have a coherent, consistent design that takes into all those accounts from somebody who knows how to do that and knows what it takes to maintain safety. Because we don't need the liability. We don't need to put something and invest the time and have it done in a way that's not coming from one imagination, one mind, one design, and causing us those crisscrossing, intersecting ideas that ends up feeling a little ad hoc, which are always the reasons that create safety issues. Sure, we will have people making decisions to cross places that they won't, but with the signage that's included in that proposal, with a coherent design, I think we can do a very good job alleviating those concerns and making sure that we have things that can be enjoyed by all those individuals simultaneously, so that multi-use recreation can take place all at one site, and that's the goal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Hoffmeyer, do you have a question for Eric, or? Oh, okay.
You know, I've always thought the 75 acres up there is a nice piece of property. You know, I think it's very ripe for the hiking and the biking and birding and the frisbee golf, etc. And maybe there's room up there for a couple of sports fields. I've never, given the terrain issues, given the fact that the Navy doesn't want lighting up there, or doesn't want sports field lighting, given those two issues, I've never thought Harbor Heights would be the home of 17 sport fields. So on the disc golf version of this and activating Harbor Heights to where it can be used by the community, I think that's a wonderful thing. On the other, I do hope we can get to a point where we can move ahead on a regional sports facility, whether that means buying the 40 acres of land behind Fort Nugent Park where you already have an existing infrastructure. That's probably the cheapest and most achievable in the near term. But your idea about buying some land further to the southwest is incredibly exciting as well. So for me, I would certainly be in favor of acquiring additional land for that sports complex, and very, very supportive of the hiking, biking, and disc golf stuff out there.
Yes, Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Lots to unpack there, Brian, and I appreciate the presentation. This is obviously this is a subject I'm very passionate about. I've been involved in youth sports for many, many years. So I guess some of my questions are: what's the land behind Fort Nugent? What's the topography of that land look like? Is it relatively flat, or would we be getting ourselves into a similar situation where we're having to look at flattening that land out?
You want to take that one, Blaine?
Yeah, I believe we don't have our engineer here, but I think it's about a 30 to 40 foot slope. So it's, I think Councilmember Hoffmeyer probably knows that too. And looking at it, sound about right? Yeah, it's got some slope, but not near as much as the slope as the current property we're talking about, the Harbor Heights. So seems a little bit more doable. We've got a lot of infrastructure there already on that property, so that's the desirability of expanding it. We don't know exactly how the school district or how they're going to take back the how much of it, the 20 acres that they have allowed us to use and for many, many, many years, and so still kind of working that out, but it still keeps it in that area there, and so something we can certainly pursue if that's an option. And then I just really like just thinking out the box there and just going south. County owns a 40 piece of property on Scenic Heights, and there's a variety of farmland out there. And in talking to some of the people here, other sports areas, there's examples of soccer clubs that have gone out and done farm property. It doesn't have to, most people drive to those kind of things, and so it doesn't have to be right. It's not really a walking area. And then you could really get the regional issue on it. And so one of the classes I took, it's in my packet there, was can youth sports drive economic development? And yes, it can. And and talking to the three that really did the youth sport area, they were both, all three of them were expanding. It was so successful as driving hotels and other events. So certainly combining that with a conference center and doing multiple things on there are really beneficial for the community, and there's a lot of economic development in it.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. There's economic development. I spent my kids' youth going to different communities and participating in sports and staying in those communities. And we talk about as council intentional economic development, and in my mind that checks that box for sure. Not being able to have lights at Harbor Heights, though, is definitely an issue. In order to have a regional sports complex, we need to have lights. I mean, that's just going to be part of it. Otherwise, we're not utilizing the space to the best of our ability. And so I have no issue with activating the parkland in the best use that we can, whether that be disc golf or bike trails or walking trails. But what's the funding source, though, for creating this disc golf? I know that we are not currently maintaining the parks that we have at the level that I believe you would like to do. We've got some field issues in the parks that we currently have, and so I would not want to prioritize adding more to our plate before we can fix or maintain what we currently have. And so that's a question for me, is what the funding source is. And then just an idea, and this is one that I've thrown out to Blaine before, is this community has a need for an indoor complex, an indoor space. We don't have indoor basketball. There is a sports complex in Centralia that has indoor football fields, soccer fields. It can be configured for basketball, it can be configured for pickleball. And so, I see an opportunity with an indoor facility that could meet the needs of our community, whether it be pickleball or basketball or football or soccer or baseball. This complex in Centralia checks all those boxes. It does all of that. And so, I love the idea of building out a sports complex and having that, but I really would encourage the discussion of having some kind of an indoor complex that can meet all of the needs of our community. And that would have to be in a place that's accessible for kids. So whether that be property in town, I see that a little more problematic being south of town, because now we're talking about transportation for kids to be able to get there. And so something like that I think needs to be done in town, but it checks a lot of those boxes that we're currently looking for. I love the idea of activating the park with those other things, but I challenge us to take a look at the possibility of some kind of an indoor complex that would meet our immediate needs and could come in at a different budget level than what we're looking at currently. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to speak to a little bit to the distance issue, some of the sites we're looking at in the county just south of town are the same distance to downtown as Harbor Heights is to downtown. So just give you an idea of distance there.
Do we know, are those places on like the shuttle route, so kids perhaps could take the Island Transit there?
That's a question I don't know. Do you know, Steve?
I think we would coordinate if we were to build that kind of
Yeah, for
facility.
sure.
So certainly they go in that direction, and they can reroute them if
Yeah.
necessary.
We would work with Island Transit probably to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stuckey?
Got a ton of questions, so I apologize for putting everyone through the gauntlet. The Counting? Okay, it's like 8. First off, I had on my list echoing Councilmember Marshall. I mean, I would much prefer to see funding go to an indoor sports complex than a regional sports complex with a bunch of outdoor. If you had to pick one, it'd be indoor. Is there any chance that this site could do an indoor sports complex at some point, or is it's just too astronomical with everything going on with the site?
Any kind of indoor facility is going to have additional costs. Obviously, you have HVAC and just the envelope of the building. But as far as like site grading or prep or some of these additional costs that we're talking about, it doesn't really change it. So I think location probably has a bigger sway on what the overall cost is going to be. The footprint for an indoor facility will probably be smaller than an outdoor, but you definitely be able to put in some of these fields to have year-round play where, you know, you only get seasonal play really with an outdoor field. So, yeah, I definitely hear the thoughts around an indoor space, and it is something that is needed in the community.
So one of the things we kind of done with this one is kind of move ahead with a piece of property without looking at feasibility first. And so if there's a consensus from council to look at indoor, I mean, we can start spending some money on feasibility, and then we have a better idea. The problem you have with the current site is access. It's $3 million to get a road in that really, and I think you would need a good road for indoor or for outdoor complex. You have indoor in that facility area, then you don't have the lighting issue, you don't have the noise issue, the advantage. You still have the slope issue in moving the dirt around. You can acquire other property adjacent to it going to the west. I mean, I talked to Councilmember Marshall about that. We strategize on there's 20 acres that's there, access wide, maybe not as sloped, and then you're kind of an area where it might work in and grow as you kind of go. But I guess the issue here is direction on where you want us to go first. It sounds like probably the easiest one is to kind of utilize the low impact kind of trails and disc golf that we're doing there and take advantage, and then look at feasibility and locations and maybe additional property in that area for a sports complex. I don't have an idea of what kind of acreage that they have, but it depends on what location. Unfortunately, when we went around and kind of a little bit chaotic, we picked the more hillier area for where we decided, and then we decided the road on the we decided that, originally we were going to come in from Gun Club, and then we picked the one from Gun Club. There was two options, one to the south and one to the council picked that, but ultimately then the LWA was kind of, well, we can't go in there, and then we ended up with Heller, so we ended up with this kind of disconnect, and so we really got to get things connected if we're going to do this and be more cohesive. And so I think one good thing about having a council that really wants to work together and put away differences and try to get the synergy going is ultimately what we need. But I mean, I have a long saying that you tell me the level of service, I'll tell you how much it costs, and I'll deliver it. So it's just a matter of level of services, and we got to figure out the funding. Most of these things play out with multiple sources, and a Centrella model, I think they have a private company, and that's what a lot of the models I looked at in the national meeting that I went to with people, they end up with these kind of models. But other people have done this, so we don't have to. We can kind of see what other people have done and follow their lead and kind of learn from them. So,
Mr. Schuler?
And I know you had a number of questions. If I may, so. And I'm still kind of new to the city, and number one, it is so awesome to have Mr. Smith here. This really helps our dialogue, and I'm just very excited to hear this presentation, and just the active park board users. This is fantastic. And so I'm just going to give you kind of my recommendation, but this isn't for you to make a decision on. I'm just kind of, as someone who has been here before and all the different needs you have, I've kind of analyzed this, so I'm just going to do a very short cursory recommendation from what I've heard from council, right? So right now with Harbor Heights, you have $1.2 million set aside, mostly in REIT funding for Harbor Heights. You've got some other money around, but not a lot. You're going to spend this year $18 million. You're going to project it to bring in $19 million. So you're doing good in that you're spending less, but you're not getting a bunch of extra money projected, right? We know the economic situation. None of us know where this is going, but right, there's inflation and 8% mortgage rates and all those things that we haven't dealt with in 10 years, right? And we'll all get to see how that turns out. So number one, just like Mr. Smith said, operations is always going to be the thing you should start with, not end with. And then I heard a number of priorities. So I think you should, this is what I would recommend to council, is get together and decide what your priorities are and what your resources are. And you've got about 1.2 million, let's just use as an example. How much of that is going to go toward playgrounds? I've heard a lot about accessible playgrounds. That's come up a lot. How much that's going to be for indoor How much is that going to be for property purchases? And then how much do you have left for Harbor Heights? And so that you'll go through that pretty quick, but you need to get down to 5 or less priorities and decide, not for this next budget cycle, but almost for the next, you can't speak for future councils, but you almost need to set that up for the next 10 years plus and say, these are going to be our priorities for next 10 years plus to get there. And then just to give you a sense of Harbor Heights, even if you said, we're not going to do any of those, forget indoor, forget accessible playgrounds, forget buying other property, we're going to put all our eggs in Harbor Heights. And again, I'm kind of giving you my real rough, you got 1.2 million in cash. I've looked at the 2022 RCO, which is the Washington State. That's really where you can get the state money. They have one program, you can get $350,000. Another one, you can usually get around $500,000. So let's just say we're really lucky, you can get $1 million out of the state. You go to your state legislative session and you can maybe get another $1 million out of them, and then somehow you go to Island County and you get another $1 million. So you're talking $4 million. You can't even get phase one even beginning, right? So I mean, that's just a reality of these things where you can do. So you can decide to start somewhere and phase this, right? And realize this is going to be a 20-year effort to get to the end. And again, there's always that other opportunity that comes in. There's, and the big thing that you've just been discussing is really for like an indoor complex in Snohomish, what the real key is a public-private partnership. And again, we did one in Snohomish with the Boys and Girls Club, where the city provided the land and the Boys and Girls Club built the facility. There was a lot of city help and funding and doing all that kind of stuff, but they operated it. And so my quick sense is you're going to need a public-private partnership to do an indoor facility. You can't do it on your own. And then for a sports complex, again, I'm loving what I'm hearing. I think partnering with Island County and doing something like that is really how you would get to a regional complex. You need an additional partner there. And then, right now, a lot of places, the soccer clubs and the other and here in Oak Harbor, it doesn't seem like those revenues are enough to really get us there. And so what really, in essence, can come from the parents in this area to help get those things started, and it appears to be limited. And so I'm just trying to throw out a couple of realities. So I love, if it were me, I would sit down and really decide, okay, of that 1.2 and some other funding, let's figure out what we got, and let's figure out those 5 or less priorities and assign some of that money. This much for accessible playgrounds and replacing like the playgrounds that are going to decay. And that's a difficulty. We've got that beautiful playground I've heard from Mr. Smith and Mr. Oborn at Fort Nugent, but it's got a lifetime, right? And we need to start planning now about replacing it, and getting the grants to go replace it are very difficult. You get the grants to go build it the first time, or the volunteers to go build it the first time. Rebuilding it is just always much harder. So you're going to need to put money toward that, money toward the indoor, money toward some sort of property purchases, and then figure out what you have for Harbor Heights. Let's assume you end up with $100,000 for Harbor Heights. I love this proposal. I think what would happen is we could get those trails in-house. I've talked with my in-house staff. We can do this in-house. I think we could clear 4 acres of that property. Those trees are not very big. We wouldn't get much value out of them, but we could clear 4 acres so people could kind of see what that looks like. We can use our own equipment to cut most of these trails, and again, do that in-house. Some of that we'd have to charge back to the staff that use it, for example, if they came out of storm, but it would be very cost effective, and we could do that for $100,000 or less. Then once you open it up, let's just say there's a beautiful trail now that connects to Elwha. People will start to park on Elwha and start using that trail, right? And we can't stop them. I mean, we won't be asking people, why are you parking here? They have a right to park there. And so that's working it out with the neighbors. Because again, once we open that up, we have to cross that road or trail when you get to it. And then the other one, as you know, is just a 1-lane road that gets to our water tower. And so, that'll be, people will park on that road too and kind of park on the grass, and you might get complaints from those county citizens about that. But again, that'll be a reality. Once it opens up and there's a trail, you'll have that. But I think that's very exciting. Now you'll have it open, and then I think the difficulty will be providing parking, because again, where is that going to be and how are you going to provide the access? And that's just a lot of money, and I don't know if you don't need to make that decision now. We can just have a very small parking lot that's really just a service parking lot for the crews for now, and get these trails opened up and open up 4 acres so that you can see what it feels like to be out there and what those grades are like. And that gets you a long ways, and you can do that this coming year, if that's what you'd like to do. And I think you can do that for less than $100,000. And then you can take the other $900,000, and with the new council, you can decide what you're going to do with it. So anyway, I hope that helped. Thank you.
Yeah, and looking for suggestions. I'll be honest, I'm a little shy about acquiring more property because of this experience. What I'm perceiving, I was not on council when this property was purchased. I'm not going to beat up on the old council because I wasn't there. But I get the impression we bought a piece of property, not having the full realization of the costs, and now it's, oh crap, what can we use it for that's on the cheap? And so that's why I'm real nervous about buying more property to get into another pickle like this. I don't know, in hindsight, if I would have voted to acquire this property. But speaking of doing things on, I shouldn't say the cheap, less expensive options, shall we say, more economical options. We could have this be majority BMX and disc golf and everything like that. How much trail are we talking about for these sort of things? You're saying per mile for biking. I mean, is there any thought on how big we want to make this? Or is that what we're discussing?
I would estimate probably about 8 miles of trail.
8 miles? Okay. And let's say we used a chunk of it for trails and disc golf and things like that. And then 5 years from now, we think, let's make this big, grandiose sports complex. Can we basically remove that stuff if it's not being used? I mean, it's a trail.
So a couple things to keep in mind with that. One is that you always got to be careful when you build a park, because once it's a park, it's always a park, right? People become very emotionally attached to their recreational amenities. Yes, the answer is yes, you can build in, continue to have those kind of things around. If you did an outdoor setup, you would just incorporate it into the design. Maybe that moves and shifts, but it's very easy to remove the trails and build something else there. Other thing is that this land was not procured with any grant funding, so there's no restrictions or attachments on what you can do there. This is an option. Another option is you sell the land. You turn it over to developers. We utilize it for a new city hall. I mean, it really is kind of a blank slate for you. Your restrictions are just around what Mr. Schuler talked about with the additional consideration and costs. Third thing, and also kind of speak to Councilor Marshall's question about funding, and just to add to Mr. Schuler's comments, is that the 1.7 million forestry grant, we can pull from that in addition to the 1.6 we have refunding for this project to put in anything that is access to green spaces. And this would fit very well into some of that funding for doing whatever we need to get people into a forested area, trail systems, anything like that. So the costs, as far as the proposal from the park board with whatever we do in trail development there, we already have the funding in place for that.
And I was kind of going to lead into that forestry grant because, I mean, if we're not going to sell it, I like the idea of it being used for something. I like these ideas. As far as creating a basic parking lot, or maybe that's even gravel, a basic parking lot, maybe some basic restrooms, can the forestry grant be used for that, or is that stretching the intent too far?
Yeah, anything that falls in that realm of access to green spaces.
Okay.
So, yes.
So I guess overall, I mean, if we're going to utilize it, I like having all three of those ideas with the biking, the hiking, and the disc golf. But I'd also like the idea of having a basic restroom and gravel parking lot or something. But obviously, if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that the idea is not, if we're going to go bigger later, we'd have to give a bigger bathroom to start off with. We don't want to create really small if it's harder to increase later on. So I guess those are my random scatterbrained thoughts at the moment.
Okay. Councilor Wigginstein.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and someone who wasn't here in the earlier stages of all this, and actually getting to see where we've gone, what we've done up to this point. I'm like everybody else. Indoor space is absolutely something that we need to be considering long term, and I'm also like not real in favor of just buying property and hoping to do something with it later. the other piece of, I love the inexpensive approach to utilizing as much of that property as we can in the meantime, just to get people out there and active. I know that we don't have, you know, a lot of those. I think Kettle Trails is where most of our mountain bikers are going on island. If you are familiar with Kettle Trails, and they're out there utilizing that and maintaining. A lot of the, you know, users maintain that stuff out there as well, picking up trash and stuff. So we definitely could use something a little more local. I don't see our youth riding their mountain bikes out to Kettle Trails and Fort Evie to go play around, but they might if it's closer in town where they can gain access a little bit, and stuff. So I like that disc golf course is a great idea as well. I know that we're working with the school district on the Fort Nugent parks just to kind of stay in communication. We also have other properties that we are side by side with the school district, if I understand correctly. Have there been any conversations with the school district on what their future uses are, some of those properties as well? Is there a possibility for partnerships with the school district? Maybe it's some land swaps. I don't know. I know that Spokane did that with their school districts. They swapped some land in order to accommodate some of their infrastructure and utilities, as well as the school district needing to build some schools and some old properties. And they're beautiful facilities, and those are structures and whatnot. But I really think we need to be partnering with them as much as possible. And I'd love to see an indoor complex right next to our swimming pool, our senior center. You know, hypothetically, we could take Jerome Street and turn it into a parking lot, which would save the school district. Probably would like that too as well, because then they wouldn't have to have all that traffic in the afternoons, especially if it's controlled and U-shaped or whatnot. It's a great location, even if it is across the street from a house, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, so those are the types of things. I'm just curious if we've really had those kind of conversations, if we're having those conversations, if we aren't, can we?
Yes, yeah, and we have had those conversations and continue to. When Michelle first came on as superintendent, we as staff, Mr. Schuler, Mr. Holborn, and I and our staff met with them. We talked a lot about, you know, that land swap. We talked about the current transportation yard that they have, finding an alternative location for those operations, maybe adjacent to where our public works facilities are, utilizing that area of fields for possible field development. In a lease agreement, we talked about the possibility of turning over from the school district to the city that volunteer park land as owned by the school district. Yes, we have eyeballed that area as a kind of a civic center ideal site location, whether that's, you know, outdoor fields, a rec center, you know, a collection of different civic buildings, ideally centrally located, right? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned the Jerome, and right now that lease we have, we've been using the volunteer park. 2 of the 3 fields there that are used for softball are on the school district's property. The lease expired in 2019, and they just are trying to figure out what to do. I'm ready to renew it with them. We've been using it forever, and they're kind of thinking about long term and not ready to make a decision of extending it. Certainly, we continue to use it even without the lease. It's kind of a holdover lease, and the problem is Jerome and that idea of moving that road is a great idea, but I think their plan long term is even if they take that school out, Oak Harbor Elementary School. The one they really want to take out long-term is Olympic View, and then bring back the Oak Harbor Elementary School. So probably a long-term basis where in our preliminary discussions, we haven't really discussed that. I don't think that really fits in their long-term plan. Making a more impactful memorial field where the old high school used to be is probably an area where we've talked about maybe making that more of an intense area, and certainly that's a possibility. But I like the idea of having a sports complex in kind of the downtown or in a nucleus area, and that's the area we really want to focus on. That's where I kind of have to get an idea of the square footage and kind of know where some preliminary plans of what we do, what we go. But it's helpful to kind of see at least 3 council members that really want us to look more at indoor sports, and so that's good feedback.
Something
Yeah, it's viable, and the old high school is Oak Harbor Elementary, just so you know that. The Memorial Field's the old stadium.
It's the old high school, isn't it?
No, the old high school's the corner building,
Okay.
and Memorial Stadium's that behind the
Okay.
bus barn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at least I remember going there for sports. I don't know about anybody else, but
Yeah.
Something to consider with any agreement or partnership with the school district as far as use of the spaces is those maintenance costs. So right now at Fort Nugent Park, adjacent to Fort Nugent Park, it's school district property. We maintain the fields for them in exchange for scheduling of and collecting a use fee from these clubs and leagues. That use fee does not cover our maintenance costs. So, and in fact, since 2017, those fees have dropped by about $10,000. So we're effectively kind of subsidizing the school district and these clubs with city maintenance costs funds. So,
thank you.
Councilor Wiesner, looks like you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I did want to follow up since Brian asked the question, what would we like to see, right? And so here you go, Brian. I'm in line with some of the conversation Chris just had. I think that partnership with the school district is invaluable, and I think the school district holistically understands that the creation of activities for our children in our community is just as important to them as it is to us, and helps make their job in the community much easier. And yeah, we have this beautiful complex on Midway Boulevard, right? We've got a bus garage that is aged, that I know for a fact that the school district would like to see improvements on. In fact, it was included in their first levy. We obviously have some room out at the city shop. In fact, we've got a significant amount of room out there. Unfortunately, we can't use any of it for sports fields due to the fact that it was previously a landfill. But we've got room out there to work with the school district to help solve the problem involving the location of that bus barn and the aging of that bus barn, and merge that with our city shop, and that of course creates a fairly large area right there on Midway Boulevard next to the Memorial Stadium, which obviously could create a pretty easy parking area for a regional sports facility. In fact, it's already all impervious surface right now. The school district, as we know, is looking at tearing down the main building at Oak Harbor Elementary, but there's some discussions about the other 2 buildings there, which obviously would make just a fantastic indoor recreation center. They're both sized for basketball courts, community meetings, stages, etc. And then, of course, the area which the school is being removed from, the building's being moved from, would, I think, it'd be a sufficient area for some additional soccer fields, which then would be near our ball fields, which would be near our pool, which would be near our senior center, and this would all be in the center of our community, literally the center geographically of town, on bus routes, sufficient infrastructure, streets in place, traffic flow in place, and that's a trifecta, and as much effort as we can continue to put into that discussions, I think, with Michelle and the school district, I think it's it's a no-brainer, I think, for both parties. They're going to have a point in time where they're going to have property that they're not going to want to have the burden of maintaining. The city steps up and maintains that, and in exchange, we provide a incredible park experience to our community, and we get our indoor facilities, and we get our outdoor facilities, and we get them in a location which makes a lot of sense, and I think is sufficient room. And of course, we've got Memorial Stadium right there too, which, with the extra money and maintenance the school district's putting into now is still quite a usable entity. We still got to work on some bathroom issues there and some other issues, but could be again a great regional sports facility. And in other communities, like I think it was Eric mentioned, schools have these partnerships with the community. Lots of communities, these regional facilities are located at or next to schools, or in cohesion with the school facilities. So you asked the question. That's my vision. That's my dream. That's what I would certainly love to support. You get to address Councilmember Stuckey's comments on Harbor Heights. The reality is, all my comments and votes in that were pretty pessimistic about the creation of soccer fields up there from the beginning. I'd walked the property many times and was actually out there shortly after the Hackneys had logged it, and there was a moratorium put on the property for those logging activities. But at the same time, my comments always were 75 acres inside our city limits. With yesterday's conversation about joint planning areas, UGAs, and all of that stuff, I think you all saw that currently I don't think there's another 75 acres contiguous inside the city limits anywhere, quite frankly. Whether there's ever going to be again, and whether it could be acquired for the kind of money we were talking, because of the fact that the property is north of 16th Avenue, because of the fact the property couldn't be used for residential, was the only reason we were able to even come close to acquiring for what we purchased it for. That property, if it was, usable for housing, it would have been tens of millions of dollars in value. So, I'm glad we got it for the citizens of Oak Harbor to use as a nature preserve. It's a gem, 75 acres inside our city limits, and I'm glad we acquired it, and I'm glad we're going to, see some uses for it that are going to keep some of the beauty and the greenery and the trails, and in the end, I guess that was kind of always what I envisioned we were going to end up at. So I support those green uses, and I certainly think long term we're going to have to look at creating parking up there, and when we do, I'm going to certainly think that looking at some of the impervious gravel solutions where they're using the grates in combinations with gravel, which allows it to be impervious so that we're not having to deal with some of the storm drain situation, is probably going to be our first logical stopgap. We are going to get to a point where if this becomes popular, it's going to be a burden on the people living down that road, and we're going to want to make sure that we at least have some way to address that. And I think pervious gravel solutions, is probably a quick solution for us to consider. But you asked, Ryan, there's my vision. Cohesive action with the school district to put that park in the middle of town and get our indoor space and solve a problem for us, both us and the school district, while enhancing, all the visions I know that you have right alongside me of the services we can provide to both children and adults in our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I hardly know where to start. I'm trying to make sense of all the notes on here. I love the work that the park board has obviously put into coming up with solutions that can work with what we have as opposed to against it. We can work with the topography, we can do things that are inexpensive, that are accessible. I love everything about that. And I appreciate that we've got a plan for the individual. There's the disc golf, the bike trails, walking trails. I might even throw a dog park in there. But I'm concerned about access. So love that there's a plan for each of those individual elements and a price estimate, but I hope, I don't know if I wrote this down right earlier, it would cost about $3 million just to get people to that property in terms of creating access and parking. I think that's gonna, just getting people there is gonna be our biggest hurdle.
No, thank you, Councilmember Heisen. I mean, you're right. That's where you're getting right to the point of if we're going to take next steps. So maybe I should slow down. Is that okay with council, and maybe give you more than a 30-second answer to that question?
Always, yeah.
Okay. I think there's a couple options. One is you put the trails in with really no parking and no additional access. If you want to go visit it, you ride your bike there or you walk, and you walk right onto the trails. If you want to drive your car there, you may park at Elwha and take up some of the empty parking spots in that neighborhood. You may park on Gun Club Road on the side of the grass. You know, we have a lock gate there that keeps you from going on the one-way road that leads to the water tower. So I mean, that is a rough option, right? Just build the trails for now to just open it up to the public and just take that step. The next step is we want to create some sort of access, and then that access, I'm assuming you're not just accessing it to stop, you wanted that, now you have to have a parking lot, right? Is if I'm drawing the conclusions correctly. And again, there's multiple ways to do it. So you have access on Elwha right now that is a paved road that ends right at our property line. So I mean, that is always an option. That's the existing one. The other one, you have access right now on Gun Club Road. So I would tell you, you could access it right now. You open up our gate and you can drive on a one-way road. You have access. It's $0. I just need to go out there and open up that gate for you and you can drive on it. So I would tell you access is zero. If you know what I mean, depending on how you approach this. Then the question is, on that one road, what happens when you drive on this one-lane road, you know, for quite a while just to get to it? Well, you get to a giant muddy ball of water, you know, thing of water right now, right? So there's nothing for you to do with your car. And so then we'd have to talk about building a parking lot. And so that's where then the expenses really get to be more than what you were seeing just to do the trails. I mean, yeah, it's much more expensive than any of the options that you saw on the slides, right? The parking. So that gets back in my mind, and again, council can analyze this how you want, but in my mind, that where do you want to put your money? Is this, do you want to take, again, your 1.2 million or whatever else you decide is for parks, and that'll be a bigger number, but you add those all up and you say, okay, so much for playgrounds, and again, I would look in a 10-year vision, at least. So much for parks, replacing existing parks, for accessible playgrounds, so much for indoor, working with the Boys and Girls Club, right now next to our swimming pool. Let's, you know, you need some cash to get going on any of these things, right? When you go to any of these granting agencies, they want to know how much are you ponying up. So the more you can come up with our cash money, the more grants you can go out and get. So I think that's in essence the discussion, and then you'll come back to us and say, okay, we've got 100,000, Mr. Schuler, what can you do with it? And you can kind of guess. It'll be very minimal, but we could put in a small, very small parking lot with, in essence, no very, very tight access, right? You go down a one-lane road and you park in a 10 or 15 or maybe 20 parking lot, and then when you need to leave and someone's coming in, you have to wait your turn. And you know, I can't remember how long it is, but I know it's quite several hundred feet from the gate into the park. So anyway, that is an option, and so I'm fine with that. Then the other thing that I know you're already aware of is when does the county think that they have on Gun Club Road that they have an ability to make us do something? And I don't have a clear answer for that. There's many things we can do that aren't permitted, that isn't in the county's purview, and then I think even if the county did say we had to do something, or the existing landowners completed the county, I think because it's in the city UGA and it's our city property, I would talk to Mr. Oborn, and we'll talk to our attorneys and find out what we can and cannot do and get back to you. But I think we have a lot of opportunity there to do things that would be in the city's interest that the county may disagree with, but they don't have the ability to stop us from doing it if you wanted to move forward.
Yeah, and being the one that dropped the $3 million number, that's intense use. And alluding to what you do, at some point, if we started using Gun Club a lot and Elwha can't take it anymore and we needed to come in from Helwar or update, that's when the $3 million, and we proposed a 16th Avenue extension there on the bottom of that property. That's about $10 million. So it's a good thing because it kind of does the circulation we want anyway, but that's just a lot of money. Talking of a huge amount of money here. And then some of the numbers that were kind of pushed out here are kind of, in talking to my finance director, our finance director, are kind of soft here. Some of them have already been spent. We spent $1.1 million of REIT money to do it, and so, but this wasn't, we didn't try to have all the budget too. We're just trying to figure out priorities and things that you want us to look at so we can, and then the soft uses that we can do now.
No, thank you, and you're right. Mr. Goldman really needs to be part of this discussion on, how much the situation could be worse or better than what we're describing. But anyway, the basic points, I think, are still the same. We've got limited resources, and we really need the council to tell us where to put those so we can really be successful and get those accomplished. And then you're right, Mr. Obern's correct. If you were building this full phase one and putting, I forget how many stalls that phase one parking lot, but it was a fairly large parking lot, right? Then at some point you would need to say, no, we need better access than just a one-lane road to get, can you imagine getting out of that game if, all 100 parents left on a one-lane road? I mean, that you're right. Now, that's where I think the point is there's various different options, and you can start slow and just do something small if that's what you want to do, and to me, that's acceptable. Did that help?
It did. It did. Kind of take a baby steps approach. What I don't want is to create these recreational activities, but not set them up for success. I want to set them up for success. And so if there's like, oh yeah, we've got this great thing going on, you just have to find this random little dirt road and figure it out. I worry that we're not setting that up for success. But conversely, it could be a way to kind of gauge interest. I mean, I go to all kinds of little beaches and parks and places that don't have big, bright paved parking lots, and it's not a big deal. So I think that it might be a good way to kind of gauge interest, and then we can expand as needed from there. So, I was on council when we purchased that 75 acres and was under the impression that it was an ideal place for sports fields. If I had known there wasn't a single flat piece on that property, I probably wouldn't have voted to acquire it. So I'm inclined to just abandon the idea of putting sports fields, flat lit sports fields out there. I think we just need to drop that entire concept. There's lots of other flat land out there. It's not in the city limits, etc. But I think that as long as other accessible flat land exists, there's no point spending 10 times as much trying to make it happen out there. So I think that we can take the property, we can make it work for us and not against us, and start that process, and then really turn our attention to the places that we can put fields. And I keep trying to make a list. I keep trying to prioritize the things that need to be done, and I keep rearranging it, and it can't be done because we need all the things. We need an indoor space. God, we've needed an indoor space since I was a kid, and we need soccer fields. I mean, just God, trying to juggle the practice and the games and stuff. It's my sister coaches soccer, and I know it's an absolute nightmare. And in terms of economic development, it would be sure nice to have something like tournament softball fields. I mean, thousands of people would come for a tournament and stay and spend all their money. It's just, there's so many opportunities. In terms of immediate need, definitely sports fields for the existing things that we are outgrowing. definitely look into an indoor space. I think even if we did put up an indoor something or other, that wouldn't negate the need for lots and lots of additional outdoor fields. It's just, it all has to happen. It has to. I am really intrigued, Mr. Oborn, by your comment about the school district. I don't remember hearing this when we had our big joint meeting, but that the elementary school that they would eventually like to decommission entirely would be Olympic View. Do they have a timeline for that?
No, they don't. Probably, I would say 15 years, 15 to 20
Okay.
years from now.
I'm really intrigued by that because I know that Olympic View has, you know, a gym. They've already got an existing big indoor space. They've got down on South Whidbey, the school district decommissioned an elementary school, and the community took that school and turned it into a community center. And so all of the classrooms are different community organizations or services. It's an incredible facility. It's a genuine community center, and it's got, you know, the music rooms, it's got the gym, it's got everything you could possibly need. So if we had something like an elementary school that had been decommissioned that we could do some remodeling on and bring up to date, that would be an incredible opportunity, because there's also lots of field space in that area. So do I like the idea of waiting 15 years for, you know, an indoor space or a community center? I do not, but I think that that's really worth looking into. We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. It already exists.
Long-term, they're really not decommissioning it. They're just going to have it morphed by the school they're going to build to the north, the New Hands. I think their idea is they're going to be short on fields in the new school, so they're really going to need it. So they had talked about originally plan of putting the transportation in where Olympic View is, but now they're moving in the direction of really just seeing that Olympic View going away and just utilizing that field. Because for a
Okay.
while there, they're going to be overextended utilizing the field for both schools. And so I think
Okay.
they've kind of had, I liked your idea
They're not
looking
just
for
abandoning the
looking for
space.
opportunities, but I just don't see it. And I see Oak Harbor Elementary School, there's some areas there maybe for 10 or 15 years that we can use for fields and stuff, but long-term, in talking about their long-term plan, I don't think they want to they wouldn't let us put a field on it or something permanent if we're going to build an indoor stadium. It's going to be a permanent, you know, it's a 50, 100 year, it's a 100-year investment that we're
Sure.
putting into that kind of facility.
I know that there have been a lot of really promising conversations about the Oak Harbor Elementary space there on that corner, a lot of that field space, green space. And the problem is that all of this stuff is very down the road, and just, you know, we need a solution of some kind now.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, the whole Harbor Heights was spurned by the fact that we know that the school was going to wanting to build a Fort Nugent
Right.
Elementary School, and that's why we went and started and
Right.
bought the Harbor Heights, is to start the process of getting additional ball field, additional soccer fields, and that was started it. But now it just really, it seems to be more advantageous to go in another direction, which at least we're utilizing the property, but that still leaves the original
Yeah. Yeah,
issue.
we wanted those
The original-
fields up and
now-
running before.
Now, it looks like the school's kind of taken it up on themselves to make the Memorial Field more playable, and as kind of, because I know probably, I mean, theorizing, perhaps some of the votes were lost because of people were concerned with losing with Fort Nugent School being built there, and the school's got to deal with that, and certainly we want to partner with them on how we figured that out. But we've had a long history with that being a field, and I think the idea here is once it's kind of that way, that's what people envision it as, and trying to transition it and trying to look for other opportunities is really difficult.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And that's, yeah, Memorial Stadium, that's where the soccer games and stuff were when I was a student here. And definitely and I was involved in the meetings about using the city property out at Public Works to park the buses and all that, because, I mean, that is prime real estate, and we're parking school buses there. It doesn't make any sense. So we absolutely need to get on that and get that moved out to the city shops so that the school can do whatever it is that they're gonna do. You know, the problem is, it's always money. It's always money, because if we do fields, they need to be lit. It gets dark at 3 p.m. in the winter, and people play sports all year long. They need lights, and I've been banging the turf drum since the beginning. They need turf, because then you don't have to wait 6 months to play on it. You can do it in any weather. I know it's really expensive to install initially, but it's a savings in the long run. It's just, if we do it, we have to do it right. I don't want to do something on the cheap, and that would just end up doing a disservice. I like the idea of public-private partnerships. If there is a wealthy citizen or community organization out there, I would love to name a sports facility after you. Call us. I would love to name a sports facility after somebody who writes a big check, absolutely. But we also have a lot of volunteer opportunity. That Castle Park at Fort Nugent was built by volunteers. I think there's, Eric, I don't know how many kids are in your football program, but I think there's something like 800 kids in the soccer program. That's a lot of volunteers, because those kids have parents and families and people with a vested interest. That is a lot of volunteers that could help us clear property, or, take away potential firewood, or, I think that there is a good opportunity to leverage some of those resources and that enthusiasm. But that's going to be a lot of work. Somebody's going to have to take on the job of leveraging that and organizing all those volunteers. And so I recognize that is a complicated undertaking, but it's got potential. The idea does. I'm interested in acquiring the land that's already adjacent to Fort Nugent. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm interested in the potential of maybe doing a land swap for some of the already flat cleared property south of town. Piecemealing this together isn't ideal, but we need fields now. And so I think if we have an opportunity in any location to even just put in one, I think we need to jump on it. The problem is that the availability is all down the road, but the need is right now, and the money is God knows where. It's really a quandary. So in terms of prioritization, I'd like to move forward with the Parks Board recommendations for those activities and work with what we've got. As Mr. Schuler suggested with the dirt road, it's better than nothing. And I think that we need to seek out and seize every opportunity for field space, even if it is piecemeal. It's not ideal, but it's needed, unfortunately. We can always build something, glorious later, and then use that property for something else if we have to. It's better than nothing. I think I've covered all the scribble on my paper. I realize that probably wasn't very helpful, but that's where I am right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Did I say that?
Councilor Hoffmeyer?
I think we might be getting further from giving staff direction. It's an important conversation to have, though. I do have a couple questions. One of them based on something our Park and Rec Director, Brian, said, and I think he's right. That was, once something's a park, it's pretty much a park forever. And I think the school district is certainly learning that the voters feel that way. A painful lesson, possibly. So my question there is, there's two things on the base that need to move for the fly-in pattern to be able to tighten up. That is the school, which is happening, and the hospital. So I don't know if we have a timeline on when that hospital may move. But currently, like you said, residential can't be built north of 16th. If that fly-in ring is tightened a little, it's quite conceivable that the lower 40 acres there would be able to be in residential. And with yesterday's meeting, hearing that we need as many as 5,000 more units over the next 20 years, should we preserve that part of that park? That's a very real question. So I don't know if there's an answer to that, and it might take some more research on staff's behalf. And then secondly, if we'd go back 2.5 years ago to staff's original recommendation to access the property off of Elwha, to put in 50 parking spots, and to put in 2 soccer fields, I think that was in the $1.5 million neighborhood. That does give us 2 soccer fields immediately. It does give us parking, and it opens the rest of that property up for the hiking and biking and disc golf, et cetera. So it does feel like we're spinning our wheels at times, and I go back to staff's original recommendation and think, gosh, that could have already happened, and we would already have 2 more fields. So those are the 2 additional things I had.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Schuler?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond. That was very helpful, Councilmember Heisen, and I wanted to kind of follow up on Councilmember Wiesner's report. One, I think that 75 acres and the fact that the council bought it was very smart, very, very smart. You're dealing with, in the short term, really, in a local government standpoint, these are just a few years. This is the short term. But in the long term, that was very wise. We're figuring out what to do next. And I'm just going to tell you a quick story. The city of Kirkland, where I used to live by, I was in South Bothell. They went out to the voters to build a new pool, just to replace the old pool, and it failed. And the reason why is they ran out of land. So I went to the 90th birthday party of a former council member in Kirkland, and he said, I remember in the 70s and the 80s, I couldn't get anyone to move to Kirkland. It was way out in the middle of nowhere. 30 years later, they ran out of land. So just remember that. Now, I know in Oak Harbor you still feel like you're way out there. You're not. You're just the next ring. Now, maybe Microsoft and Google and Amazon will all decide to go move someplace else, and we'll have a problem like when Boeing closed in the 1970s and turned off the lights. But if we don't have that issue, then Oak Harbor's in that ring, right? In Bellingham, I've already seen, I'm discovering Bellingham. Bellingham's already too expensive for anything. So there's no more place to go. So I think you're very wise in considering these property purchases, and I would encourage you to take a look at those properties to the south of Fort Nugent and really consider that, and not to throw that off, but to really make that part of your plan, because you will run out of space. And so that would be the lesson from Kirkland. And if we need to bring Julie back
Steve
to help us
Schuler,
that,
this is
let's do
Dave
it.
Goldman speaking. So when I worked at Kirkland 3 years ago, they were talking about teaming up with Bellevue and Redmond to do a pool levy again. And it looks like they decided to put it on the ballot for this fall to do an aquatic center. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Anyone else on this subject? Thank you, Brian Smith. You, or it's up to the council, sure.
My name is Tom Jones. I'm a park board member. Nice to be here. I'm thrilled with the conversation. It's a little bit scattered, and that's because there's so much to do and there is so much need. Just one thing as a longtime recreator, and more than that as a kid growing up, don't forget that what we should be providing is not just for teams. When we think about sports complexes, we think about soccer fields and basketball courts and baseball fields, and those team comes to mind. But when I was growing up, I played organized sports. But more than organized sports, I just went and met my buddies at the park. And I played, modified baseball, basketball, whatever. So please keep in mind the individual recreational users, not just the teams, not to the exclusion of the teams. But I think it's important to keep that in mind. So that goes to distance to the facility, what kind of facilities they are. We build something so nice and then we fence it up and then nobody can use it but the teams. Goes counter to my experience. So anyway, that's my comment. Again, I'm thrilled just to be a part of this and listen to the planning. So hopefully the park board can pull some of this together for you, make some solid recommendations for your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just end by saying thank you so much for the dialogue and for your feedback. We're going to take that and disseminate it and chew on it and talk about it in the Parks Board. We'll work with Public Works and our engineering department to look at options and costs. We'll meet with the school district, and then we'll We do have 80,000 that we set aside in the budget for doing a Parks and Recreation master plan this coming year. We'll get into that in just a few months. So that'll help, I think, clarify kind of a roadmap forward and how to deal with these thousands of needs, right? But thank you. And then we will bring this back to council in an official evening session for you guys to hear a little more on a pathway forward based off of your feedback and the park board recommendations, and give you a chance to take a formal formal direction to staff at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda, which is an action item, amendment number 2 to professional services agreement, HEMSTAD Consulting for the multifamily tax exemption program. And we have our development services director, Mr. David Cool. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Appreciate the workshop yesterday to give us some direction on the multifamily tax exemption. Today, we'd like to talk a little bit about the contract extension. HEMSTAD Consulting, as you know, has been performing under a professional services agreement for us since April 4th of 2023. Our contract includes a scope of services that includes developing the multifamily tax exemption program. This contract extension that we're going to consider now is from October 31st, 23 to October 31st of 24. We are not asking for any money at this time. If we need more money, we'll come back next year. Feedback from last night's meeting was very helpful. Some of it was to provide more examples of how the tax exemption works. And so I heard you, and if we do extend the contract, then I'll work with HEMSTAD to make sure we get better concrete examples so you can see exactly how the numbers come out. This extension also provides more time to review details of the tax exemption and review that with the county. I think there was feedback that even went as far as suggesting that we meet with the county commissioners and talk to them about how the tax would be shared. Also, this will provide more time for us with an extension to reach out to developers. I know that HEMSTAD reached out to some, but I don't know who they were, and maybe we need to talk to local people and see what they would think of this tax exemption and how it would affect them. So this is our recommended motion, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
So before we turn to council for questions, since this is an action item, I'd like to verify that we've gotten no input from our public. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. We received no input.
Okay. So we'll then bring it back to council for input questions. Councilor Stuckey, did you have your hand up? Okay. Sure. No, you don't need to talk. You don't want to.
Believe me, I'm not looking to elongate this. In fact, I was just going to make the motion, considering we've talked about this a lot and can still discuss it if we need to. And I heard this amount will not change, which always perks my ears up, but we're not talking about adding more money. So I move to approve the professional services agreement amendment with HEMSTAD Consulting, extending the time frame for the development of the multifamily tax exemption program.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second, and the motion reads exactly like the recommended action before you. That motion is made by Councilor Stuckey, second by Councilor Wittgenstein. So turn to council for questions or input. Seeing none, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. Any opposed? Looks like it passes unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now we're on a roll. Okay. So we will turn to our next item, which is boards, commissions, and committees proposed bylaw updates. And I think we have joining us our IT and records manager, Sabrina Combs. Sabrina, welcome.
Hello. You ready? Okay. All right, so this presentation is about our boards, commissions, and committees. This has been a process that we've been working on for several months. It's been the administrative team as well as our new records management team. So we've been working on this, and so I'm just going to walk you through the process and the background and show you what we've done. So the background is that staff implemented standardized templates for meeting agenda minutes and video recordings of meetings to create more transparency for the public. And the goal with that was to make sure that no matter what meeting you were looking at or following, you could find the information very clearly. So we've already put that in place. Next, we started looking at, as part of this process, the different bylaws and ordinances and realized there were several different ones. Some of the bylaws were extremely old, over 30 years. So what we decided to do was start drafting revisions to those for the advisory boards and take them to them for feedback. Then we also reviewed those draft versions with the city clerk, the finance director, and city attorney. So we have two types of advisory boards at the city. We have our internal advisory boards that focus on internal issues for the city, and then we have our external advisory boards that are public facing. So some specifics with those are the internal advisory boards include these boards, commissions, and committees. And then these are the external advisory boards. These are the ones that we're focusing on for the first review that we've done and for this presentation today. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the uniform code that we created and that draft, and then I'm going to ask you for your comments and feedback. Then we're going to look at the ordinances for each individual advisory body that's externally facing and go through any of your comments and feedback. And Kim is here to take notes so we can capture that. And then we're going to review the bylaw changes so that you can see the consistency that we've created there. And then staff is planning to update the documents, share those edits with the advisory board, and return to council with some additional edits. So to start with, let's talk about the Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Chapter 265. So we're asking to repeal that chapter. And the reason we're repealing it and replacing it is there were so many edits that we ended up making that it's just easier to repeal the current version, which is the organization of boards, commissions, and committees, and then adopt the new version, which is the uniform policies for boards, commissions, and committees. So changes that we had are things like membership and residency requirements to provide more diversity on some of our advisory boards, staggering the term expiration dates. So for example, position 1 or any of the odd number positions will expire in 2027, and position 2 and the even number positions will expire in 2026, and that allows us to stagger those. Then we're going to realign the terms to the calendar year, so January through December, and then steps for addressing annual bylaw updates, meeting calendars, training, officer elections, attendance policies, member resignations, and filling vacancies. Basically, we want the bylaws to be something that anybody on those boards or commissions can reference to understand what's going on. So now I'm just going to ask if you had any questions on the uniform policies for boards, commissions, and committees.
Does not look like it.
Okay, so I'm going to keep moving on. So one of the other things we did, I'm sorry? Oh, I thought I heard something. Okay. One of the other things that we did was address naming conventions. So we changed for the advisory boards, we used to have boards, committees, and commissions, and it was a mouthful. So we're starting to call them advisory boards as a consistency, and then we changed most of them to commissions. We could not change the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee because it's per state statute that it is a committee. So that's just for all of our reference. So just as a review, here's the list you're seeing. Most of them didn't change, there were just a few. And I'm going to explain the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission naming soon. So the first one is the Arts Commission, Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Chapter 229. And what we did with this one was we updated the membership requirements. So there are 7 positions, including the chair and vice chair. Positions to add that we're considering are the ex officio, alternate, and student. We also want to document the meeting schedules. And then this one particularly has monetary donations, gifts for language that they have in there, and then city funding of the arts language. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions on that one.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just quickly, I love the idea of adding a student member. There used to be like always a student member on the Arts Commission. I don't know if that was by rules or what, but I think when it comes to things like arts and parks things that we are intending for use for the next generation. I think it's really important to get the youth involved in those things. So, thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Councilor Stuckey.
I also think that every commission should have a council member assigned to it. Again, not to lead that meeting. We're not chairing, but just because it helps with the buy-in with the others here. You know, we have that perspective from quote unquote one of our own, if you will, who can help fill in gaps when committee members aren't able to come or something like that. So I know we don't have that for planning or for the MAC. You know, I'd like to see those with those as well.
Okay. And for the ex officio role, one of the things that we did find out is that we put in there is whether or not they're voting. And so that is in the language that we provided. Any other feedback? Just making sure before I move on. Okay. So Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 2.30. So the changes here are name change to Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. Before it was Park Board, only one park. So we've been trying to work on fixing that because everybody's like, did I make a mistake? No, it should be Parks. And then Recreation because of their expanded duties and powers to reflect that, so that we're talking more about the recreation programming. Additionally, they have 5 positions for their membership, including a chair, vice chair, and ex officio, and then the consideration of adding an alternate and student, so similar to what we've been talking about. And then, of course, the meeting schedules. So any discussion items with that one? Okay. Marina Advisory Commission, the Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 2.39. So with this one, what we're doing is it's the Marina Advisory Commission, so that's a slight name change. And then the membership requirements for the position, there's 5 positions, including the chair and vice chair. And then for the diversity element, what we've talked about doing and recommended in the versions that we created was there are 3 members who are customers of the marina, either boat owner, lessee, or storage lessee, and 2 members shall not be customers of the marina. And then positions to add potentially alternate ex officio and student. So any discussion for this one? Okay. Oh, do I need to go back?
Yeah, he has it. Okay.
Okay. Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. Sabrina, I'm just wondering if, you know, with what all we've got coming ahead of us involving the marina, you know, and we're talking about marina revitalization plans and all of that, if that committee's big enough or not. You know, with 3 people that are down at the marina and 2 not, and, you know, you get, you know, just 1 or 2 people that can't make a meeting, and that's a pretty small meeting. And I think we got a lot of discussion that's going to be coming forward about the marina that's going to have some heavy lifting by that commission.
Okay, so Councilmember, are you suggesting maybe we expand that one to 7 members?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
Okay, I'm seeing head nods from other council members, so, okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you. Okay, so then the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 266. So the changes here, we have no changes to the membership. It's 7 members. And because of the specifics of how this committee works, we are keeping the 1 elected official serves as the chair. There are 3 collectors, businesses that collect tax, and then 3 receivers, those that benefit or receive funding. There's no ex officio or student members because of the role that this board plays. And then committee proposals and grant application language specific to the LTAC are also included. Any discussion items for that one? Okay. So then for Planning Commission, it's Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 18.04. And for this one, membership requirements and positions, we're looking at that. The 7 positions including chair and vice chair, options to add an alternate ex officio or student member, added specifics relating to procedures, hearings, and rules of conduct. Those items are specific to this commission, just making sure that we're covering those items for them. Any discussion on that one? Okay. And then Historic Preservation Commission, Oak Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 18.50.040. So currently, this group is not meeting. However, new members have recently been appointed, and the plan is to restart this commission soon. So what we did was draft their information for the chapter based on what we've learned with the other advisory boards, and also Kim did a lot of research and work with McHale so that they could identify municipal references for this type of commission. So we've just covered that. So any discussion there? Okay. So then bylaws. The bylaws are pretty consistent. They're individual based on the group, but what we did, or Kim did, I should say, Kim did an excellent job of making sure that the format was consistent, and we're just filling in for these categories and then adding any specifics to that particular board. So those are the items for the bylaws. As you can see on the list, there's a lot to cover. But again, we wanted to make sure that this is something that anybody on that committee or the community could reference to see what they need to follow or do in the instance of different things that happen in that group. So are there any questions around that one?
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I don't know if this is more of a bylaws thing or if this falls back on the individual committees. You know, I know over the years there's been a lot of talk among council about having a residency requirement applied to a certain percentage of the positions at least. And I'm not sure what everybody else thinks on that. I just know it's something that has came up a lot over the years.
So that is a good question. We did in the different bylaw documents include information about those specifics depending on the group. Some of them we even expanded it so that it was out to some of our unincorporated areas depending on the topic. And then like what we did with the Marina Advisory Commission, we made sure to include people who fell into different categories. So we tried to address that in different ways. And I believe the Arts Commission was another one that we had some specifics. Kim's helping me keep track. So.
Perfect, and that's why I waited for the bylaws. I thought that's where that was.
Yeah.
Perfect.
There's a residency requirement in uniform.
Okay. So it's in 2 places.
Awesome. And yeah, I think that that certainly makes sense with that being extended out to the unincorporated areas as well at times. So.
Yeah, and it'll also help us when we're receiving the applications when we're checking to make sure they meet those requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Stuckey.
2 thoughts. One, I'm all for attendance requirements and those attendance requirements being enforced. When I first started, I kind of went to a couple of the boards a few times, and it wasn't uncommon for some people on the boards to just not be there time after time, and we'll let it slide. I mean, I know it's volunteer, but I mean, I don't think saying if you miss 3 meetings in a certain period of time or something like that, that's unreasonable. And secondly, and refresh my memory, we talked about a little while ago about a code of conduct, and we agreed not to do it. Did we say we're going to do something as an amendment? Remember we were talking about code of conducts for council? Did that just die? We agreed not to do a new code of conduct, but I thought there was talk about adding it to something, like doing an attachment.
I'll let you do.
I don't remember, and I'm
kind
of asking for my mind to be refreshed.
So, okay, so for attendance, and then I'll let Blaine talk about code of conduct. So for the attendance piece, we agreed. We were watching and seeing some of those patterns. We also realized it was very difficult from the mayor's office perspective to decide what are the next steps we want to take. So we really wanted to document what that will look like, because some groups meet monthly, some have a break in the summer. So when you think about 9 meetings in a year, and if you miss 3, that's a pretty good chunk. So we wanted to make it so that we had a process to address that with the member and also allow other people who are interested in stepping up to be able to participate. So we hope that we've addressed that in the language that we've provided. So that was something that we put in there. And then I'll let Blaine address code of conduct.
Code of conduct was kind of meant to come behind this area here to kind of get this conformity, because there is some components of conduct already in the bylaws and already in the items here. So, and that's still one of the to-do lists for our city attorney.
So if I'm correct, the answer is we'll look at that, but a little ways down the road. That's not what we're talking about today.
Yeah, it does cover some of the code of, because it has a conflict of interest and there's components of it. So when we kind of went through it, we kind of felt like, well, let's do this first. It's more of a priority in cleaning up the issues with the committees and such. And then we'll have to kind of figure out how that kind of extends from the council to the other representatives of the city.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry, on the attendance piece, I forgot my tablet at home. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, can you give us an example of where that attendance at all meetings is expected of all commission members?
It's in the uniform code under 2.65050.
We're looking at
Yeah, we're,
in the background material.
I remember a commission that I served on many years ago, because the members were appointed by the mayor, the group like didn't have the ability to what happened was we had a member that moved and they didn't resign officially. It wasn't like documented, but they moved and they weren't there, but because we had no control over the attendance piece or the being appointed to the different positions piece. So what we did was we changed the rules to say if someone missed 3 meetings in a row, then that gave us the ability to go to the mayor and say we need another member appointed or something to that effect.
Yeah, we
It was a
added
long time ago.
information in the uniform code, and then there's a separate section in the bylaws itself, attendance, that clarifies how we go about that process. We didn't want to be too strict, but we wanted to provide the tools so that we could address it if it came up.
Sure.
And then that's why we're also doing these application processes that we'll have online and available for the public to fill out their information and for the city clerk to verify.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Just making sure. Then our next steps are we want to update the documents based on the feedback we received today. We're then going to share the edits with the advisory boards that we've got, that we're talking about today, and then return to council with final documents in December for the approval of these documents. And then our next steps in this will be to make sure that we're addressing through December and January the new terms. And then in January and February, we're going to really work with these advisory bodies to make sure that they've done their training, that they have their calendars updated and posted and published, that we know what their annual action items are and we can document them. And then that'll allow us to also beef up some of their web pages that are specific to the groups to help the community know what's going on. So with that, I want to thank you, and those are, unless you have any more questions.
It looks like Councilor Stuckey might.
As far as terms go, I'm gonna make a blanket statement that may not be 100% accurate. It seems like it's not uncommon, because a lot of terms are 4 years or 2 years right now. Is that correct?
That's what we're changing, yes.
It's not uncommon for people to not fulfill those terms.
Yes.
I see more people dropping off after a year or two than I see people doing a full 4 years. So a couple questions with that in mind. Are we just gonna do it where if you drop off 3 years to your term, that position will be open, it'll be a 1-year term?
Yeah, so we're going to let that person fulfill that term, whoever becomes the new person, and then they can reapply when that term becomes available. So we're going to really tighten that up, because what we found out was, and I'm going to own this with our team, the spreadsheet we are currently tracking has 85 different pages to it, because there's been so many leaves, removes, the terms haven't been kept, and that's why we want to document this, so that people know that the odd positions are on those odd years, the even positions are on those even years. You complete that term, and then we can reapply for that term when it becomes available at its end, at the end of that term. And then the next group of people can apply for it. So if that person wants to continue, they could apply.
Any thoughts of a 2-year term as opposed to a 4-year term, considering it's not common for people to run the full 4 years?
We talked about that, but there was a conversation about staggering and making sure that we were covered for that. So that was where that discussion, where we landed at the 3-year. I think we talked about 4, we talked about 2, and we also realized that 2 years makes it a little more catch up. So we were trying to find a good even place for that.
And as far as talking about staggering the terms, which I love that idea, how are you going to do that for people who are, like, how are you going to standardize that for people who are a year into their term? Like, how are you going to pick right now who's going to have a term shortened and things like that?
So Mikhail has a plan for that, and we're going to go out and contact those people and work through that list. So it is going to be a little bit of work, but we found a way to do it, and I believe it's that we're not focusing on the people for this next year, but it'll be that next group of terms that we're going to reach out to contact.
So there's a little grandfathering in.
I'm sorry?
There's going to be a little grandfathering in.
There may be some potential of that, yes.
Okay. just making sure people aren't being cut short, and who do you I mean, I would not want that role, so my hat's off to Mikhail.
Yeah, we just realized we need to do this cleanup, so we've got to start somewhere.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that has always, I guess, kind of bugged me about being on council is that we don't know when a board member has vacated a position until we get the thing in our packet saying
New person.
the mayor has appointed a new person and we have to approve it. And I mean, some of the people on these boards and commissions have served for a really long time, and like if I'd known somebody had left, I would have, sent them a little thank you card or something to that effect. And so I realize it's a lot of moving parts. It's just one more thing to let us know. But if there could be some kind of mechanism in place to let us know when somebody leaves, I would appreciate that. I would also appreciate the ability to go somewhere and see a master list of who's on our boards and commissions. I go on our website and it has everything but the members, unless I'm doing it wrong.
No, so part of what you said, the master list, is why we want to do this cleanup.
Okay.
So we will have a better list, a simpler list to look at. The other piece of notifying you, I don't think that's something that is difficult for our team to do. It's just adding a communication mechanism to it, so we can notify you. But the biggest thing is just we want to have that cleaner list so that you guys can reference it, so that we have it available for all of us to reference, and it's just simpler to understand their terms, when they started, when they ended, and we have that information.
Okay, yeah, I would really like to be able to go to whatever their page is on our website and see who's on the board. So yeah, other than that feedback, I think the rest of it looks great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Blaine, did you have something to add? I just didn't
Nope,
know. Okay.
she covered it.
So I do have something to add. I want to thank you, Sabrina, and Kim, who was sitting down, and otherwise I would have introduced you, our senior legal assistant, Kim Perrine, for tackling this. I know that Mikhail was a big part of this, but
Yes.
We've had this need for a number of years. You saw the need, you recognized it, and then you're fixing it, and that's really cool to see it. I appreciate all your time, because I know it hasn't been easy, and the timing was great. I'll be soon not doing this, and I don't have to remember commission, committee, board. I won't have to worry about that. So good luck to those who do, and it's a great thing, because just puts it together and makes it so much easier. So thank you.
Well, thank you to you and Blaine for your support, because when we reorganized the legal department and created some of these new roles, it was one of the things that when we sat down, the group said, we need to fix some things. So we're working on SOPs, we're working on documentation of things, and then this. So this has been a huge effort, and kudos to Kim and Mikhail, because I'm just here presenting, but they are the heavy lifters. So I really thank them for the work they've done on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll be back.
Okay, great.
Great.
Okay, we'll move on to item number B, last thing on our agenda, City Administrator report, and I'll turn to Blaine Oborn.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Blaine Oborn, I'll cover City Administrator. It's my pleasure to kind of highlight some of the stuff in the long report here that of note, and maybe highlight some of the changes, because it always evolves. In 1 week, some of the things are already obsolete. Starting off on the first page there, under City Administrator leadership items, we have a committee that was looking for that reviewed 11 applications submitted for the hold on, I jumped on here, I'm merging together. As part of our class and comp study, we had an appeal process, and we had 11 appeals come in, and the mayor and I and the HR director are looking at how to handle those, so we're close to getting that done this week.
How many appeals?
We had 11.
Okay.
And then going on to a recent retreat we had here with the department heads, our city leadership here on September 25th. So some good discussion there about priorities, team building, the central development area is a key area we're talking about a lot. And then we're also prepping for the all-hands staff meeting and came up with some ideas of entertainment for that. And council members are invited to that on Thursday, November 2nd. So please be sure to keep that on your calendar and join us in that festive activity there and coming together as employees. So a lot of good progress there. Moving on to, we have a grant out with the county, Rural County Economic Development for North Whidbey Sewer Expansion. I was able to go to the County Commission and on October 11th and talk about that grant. And one of the concerns, that grant's about economic development and extending sewer in that area for future development in industrial areas. And so there was some concerns with the existing housing in there and the effect on it. So and then they're willing to give us some incentives to maintain that housing in that area. So more details to come on that as I work through the language and work through kind of meeting the city's objectives and also with the county's objectives on that area there. So, and then on October 11th, I participated. I'm part of the insurance legislative committee on our insurance authority. We were in a pool, and so one of the things that they spend a lot of time is try to stop legislation that can drastically increase our insurance rates. So I put a little packet in there of some of the talking points that go over that they came up with that really help us talking about insurance and talking with our legislatures, and we're going to probably add that as one of our priorities there, because there is we already have a lot of laws that increase our insurance as opposed to other states, and there's a lot of efforts to pass laws that will even increase our insurance even more. So sometimes we want to get this balance with paying people claims, but on the other hand, some of these laws will really affect us financially and can divert funding away from other projects like what we're talking about here, parks projects, if we have to spend it on insurance claims. So getting that own balance there. I know it's not a real sexy thing, but it is an important element there. So and then one of the things I grateful to attend there is the ICMA conference, the International City County Managers Conference. And one of the things I like to do is give you a long page here of every class I did. And I've already referenced one of those already with the one on the kids sports really drive economic development. And that was really germane to our discussion here about parks planning there. So certainly there's a lot of other topics. I'm not going to go into that, but certainly if you have any questions or concerns with any of those things, or I think there's a lot of great knowledge there, and I like sharing it with you. Legislative outreach. So this is the area I thought we were going to start with. So here at the beginning here, so we are looking for a government relations, federal government relations, and we did an RFP. We had 6 responders on that. We have a group with Councilmember Hoffmeyer and Mayor Pro Tem Heisen, and then our Recreation Director Smith and our Grants Administrator Wendy Horn and myself, and we interviewed the top 3. We did select a top candidate, and we're going to bring forward the recommendation to enter in an agreement with that firm on November 8th. And then legislatively, exciting area here is a long effort the mayor's had in trying to bring down our rates for our clean water facilities. So, so there is some opportunity of getting some refinancing. We had one that was at a higher rate for a longer term that wasn't very desirable, and so there is some opportunity to get new loans at a lower rate. And one of the things we said, well, why aren't you offering that for refinancing too? So we've got some legislative support on that, and Ecology has given us more consideration. Certainly it's still in the application process, but their initial assessment was we didn't qualify, but we were able to get some pressure on them, and they're considering that. And so, I mean, it has the potential of $20 per month, lowering the bills if we can lower the interest down. So it's a significant benefit there. So not done yet, but it just highlights the effort we have there. And hopefully I can come back and tell you good news here. So too early to tell whether we'll be successful, but I certainly want to continue to push on that effort there. Moving on, community support here. CAPRON funds is a issue that we talked about at the COG, Council of Governments there. County has the same issue. I think you've heard our finance director talk about that revenue dwindling already, and as we get less dependent upon gas tax, it'll kind of go away. So it's a big deal with us. All other municipalities in the state that aren't on the two islands, they use a lot of general fund for their streets, and we don't use any. So it's an issue that we have to deal with, and we want to make sure we maintain that or look for alternatives as the formulas kind of change as the reliance on fuel diminishes. And then moving on, development services, certainly a great successful meeting yesterday, and but the combined meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Councils. Appreciate your participation there. Finance is working on ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning, evaluation of that, and it's a major undertaking there once we go to a more modern accounting and financial and ERP system. So we were able to do the llama already in the planning, and so it's good that we kind of monetize and get some efficiency there. So, and then certainly something's going to get burned down on weather permitting on October 28th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. there, that the Swantown property that we purchased and part of the transition and building a second station. So good progress there. And I think lastly, police department I wanted to focus on has a national prescription drug take back October 28th. So go by the, if you have a whole bunch of unused dosage of medication, you can drop it off at the police department from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that concludes my report. Take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oldborn. Any questions? Not seeing any, so any other, yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry, I know everybody wants to get out of here. I have a request to add a discussion item to a future workshop. I was hoping Steve Schuler would still be here, but I want to discuss pervious concrete and whether or not the city thinks it would be a good idea to maybe make that a requirement for future development. Just kind of interested in the pros and cons of pervious concrete, whether or not we should require it.
Yeah, I believe there was some done when they did the project there, the last development where the grocery store is and where the another Starbucks is and Mod Pizza and those. Yeah, I believe that's was one of the examples we have. So okay.
When Navy Federal built their new building on Highway 20, that was the largest pervious parking lot in the state at the time.
Yeah, and then I think we've still got the other one on our to-do list coming here. And then you and I had some good discussion on ports, and so I'll get you some more information on that.
And thank you for the information, the links that you sent me, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? No? Seeing none, then